Hello and welcome. I'm Eddie Gordon, courseware designer at Pragmatic Institute and today's host. A quick shout out at the top of our webinar today for a project that we're very proud of, the Pragmatic Alumni Community. If you haven't heard about that yet, you probably haven't been listening, but the Pragmatic Alumni Community, or the PAC, is a members only exclusive online community. You'll find everything in there from a curated library and peer discussions to member exclusive events, access to our instructors as well. The whole goal being so that you can spend less time searching for answers to product questions and more time implementing them. There is a slide on the screen about the pack. I believe if you're quick, there is still an introductory rate of 30% off the list price for those who register early. So check that out at pragmaticinstitute.com/community. All right. Our guest today is a self-described product process geek. He is in good company around these parts with a title like that. He is the founder of the Win-Loss Agency and principal facilitator at Market Driven Business. He's here to tell us today how to understand our markets better than anyone else. He is a market researcher, workshop facilitator, and sometime drummer and synth musician. I happen to know that because nothing on the internet ever really goes away. Please welcome Mr. Charles Topping. Charles, how are you?
Thank you. I'm doing fine, and my kudos to your research team for finding that nugget.
We're a team of one over here today, but thank you.
That's wonderful. So just to get us started for today, I want to take a moment to thank the team at Pragmatic Institute for hosting, to Eddie and Sarah and Rebecca and the rest of the team. I got my start in product with pragmatic marketing, just like almost everybody else here, with foundations. Taking foundations directly led me to the work that I'm doing today. So it's an honor for me to be able to participate with Pragmatic in this way today and to bring this back to the Pragmatic community very, very many years later now. So Eddie was kind enough to give me a nice clean intro. So we'll skip over this slide here. Just to get us going here, so NIHITO is a core, it's a foundational principle of the pragmatic framework and how we work as product leaders. And so what I'd like for you to do, participants, just to get us going here, is punch into the chat, what is NIHITO? What does it, who can reach back to foundations for us and punch up what NIHITO means?
I don't get to answer, do I? Is there a prize? Is there money?
You don't get to do that.
Okay.
We'll give a nice big shout out to Jennifer Wise for being the first one to come out with nothing important happens in the office. And that's, of course, one of the truest things that we will ever believe in product. And so a key point for us to remember is that smart teams aren't just ready to learn from their buyers. Smart teams already know their buyers. Now, if you just give me one moment here, I'm going to do a quick little aside, and I'm going to turn on my video, and I'm going to just see if I can get this here. Now I keep over my left shoulder the question, are you ready to learn from your buyers? And this workshop today, here, don't need to look at me the whole way. So this workshop today is going to cover that for you. It's going to give you the tools, it's going to give you the process, it's going to give you the understanding that you need to get there. And where does that information come from? Well, for the last 5 years, we as a team at the Win-Loss Agency and then the team at Market Driven Business, we have done everything that you can do wrong in NIHITO interviews. We have learned from that, and then we've done it wrong again, and then we've learned from that, and then we've done it wrong again, and then we have learned from that. And so the contents of today's webinar are really more than 5 years of learning on what to do and what not to do, and then ultimately best practices that you can put into your own work every day as a product manager. And the one thing that I want to add is that it takes a lot of time to do this, right? Or so you think. So let's get on with the presentation. So what's the process? The process, it can be broken down into 3 individual steps. we're going to start with our research. And the research usually involves interviewing buyers or users or influencers or other participants in the space, open-ended questions. We're going to have conversations with them where it's really like a back and forth, just a straight conversation with what it is that's going on in their life, what their problems are, very problem oriented. But as you'll see a little bit later on, we'll be able to focus on a lot of other parts of their experience in working with your organization. Once we've pulled together all of that research, then we're going to, it's kind of like a big, like a big pile of Lego bricks. They're just all piled up together. And what on earth does all this mean? It doesn't make sense. We just got the raw materials. And so it's in the analysis that we're going to put that together into a structure that makes sense for people, that you can actually now use to pass on to the organization. And that's, of course, phase 3 of any NIHITO project. And that is the reporting and the feedback. Because if you don't pass this information on to the organization, if change is not found through the work that you've done, then why is it that we're doing this work? Ultimately, the reason that we're doing this is so that we can affect change in the organization. So let's start with what NIHITO interviews are really good at. NIHITO interviews are really good at discovery. They're good at learning things that you don't know yet, at better understanding. And the most important thing that I want you to remember with NIHITO interviews is that they are contextual. They provide the context to all of the big data that you're already getting. And so many organizations today use the information that comes back from their apps or they're a SaaS service and they're watching how the users are interfacing with the software, they're working with it. And as we do that, or even our Google Analytics, if we're in more of a product marketing role, we look at that information and then we derive decisions from that. But what's ultimately missing from a lot of that information is the why. Why is it that that is happening? And so we end up divining why the why is happening because we have to try and figure that out. So what NIHITO interviews are so good at is providing that real world, market driven from your buyer, explaining to you why it is that they are performing the actions that they are. So these NIHITO interviews will help you to contextualize your big data. But of course, NIHITO interviews aren't good at everything. So what are they not good at? Well, they aren't good at validation. And that's because we as busy product professionals don't have enough time in any given day to talk to enough people to reach some sort of statistical relevance. Right? We can have a lot of interviews. We can confirm a lot of hypotheses. We can feel pretty good about where it's at. In fact, performing interviews will help you to feel, yeah, oh yeah, that's right. We were thinking about that. Or, oh, we've just been talking about that last week. Or, oh, geez, the people in support have been telling us about that. And so it'll kind of confirm your hunches. But really, until you go out there and use other methods like consulting your big data or performing surveys or other forms of validation, you don't really know for sure. So again, we'll get back to NIHITO interviews are really, really good at discovery, at learning new things. So you might ask, well, when's the best time to do a NIHITO interview? All the time. All the time is the best time to perform a NIHITO interview. Things change, right? They aren't the same all the time. And even now, with things changing so quickly, we need to stay on top of having these conversations, and we'll get to how to help you with that coming down the road. So I want to give you a really good pro tip here, and that is to tie the research that you're doing in your NIHITO interviews to the research, to the strategic goals of your business. And the reason that we want to do that is because oftentimes product teams go ahead and make an awful lot of research. They conduct interviews, they analyze the interviews, they learn all sorts of great things. And what happens is they go to share it with the organization, and then another team says, well, we've heard differently. We talk to the customer too, and we have different information. And so then the product team becomes the only, or the product marketing team becomes the only ones who are really paying attention to the product developed knowledge, right? And so if you can get right in at the beginning of your project and you head over to a sales lead or another person that you know within that part of the business, and you get somebody from support or you get somebody from the development team and start asking them what it is that they want to know, tie all of that into the strategic goals of your business, then you've obtained operational buy-in for your research before you've even begun. And now, when you've actually developed research and you have something to share out, those people are already invested in what it is. And that's a key element of being able to affect change within the organization, which of course is ultimately the goal of all of our NIHITO interviews. So to start us off here with the workshop portion, I hope everybody's had opportunity to download the link in the chat. Make sure you download the document and have it open if you can on kind of the right side of your monitor, a second monitor if you've got it, but have that open because we're going to be working that through the rest of this process. So
Charles, we had sorry to interrupt you there. We had a few people mention that they couldn't access it through Google Docs specifically. I think most people can, but do you have maybe another link where they could access it? I know you had one where only a few people could access, but maybe those few people could get it through that other one.
Let me pause for one moment here, and I will get that for you. Eddie, while we're doing that, let's chat shop a little bit.
Sure.
What's a good one for us to talk about? So Pragmatic has been conducting win-loss for quite some time, right?
Oh, yes. We have to drink our own Kool-Aid? Is that PC to say? Eat our own dog food. That's the phrase.
You know what the fun part is? I do too. I send is that but the thing is I don't because you can conduct your own research, right? But what can end up happening is that people feel a little bit on the reluctant side to be totally openly honest, right? And that's okay. I understand why they would feel that way because there's kind of political things going on, right? So
right.
Having a third party do the interviewing for you can really help you get, I don't know if cleaner information is quite right. So I'm just going to send this to all attendees. Here we go. There you are, friends. Let's grab that, and hopefully that's been a good opportunity for everybody to come up with what is it they want to learn. And what I want you to think about with this, what do you want to learn? It doesn't have to be like a big lofty goal. It can be something quite small. But even just kind of what keeps you up at night. What is it that you want to learn from your market? And the reason that I ask it is that when you're conducting this kind of research, it's a unique opportunity to hear from your market, right? And so you really want to take advantage of that opportunity. And so there's something within your organization that says, we really want to learn this. So just think about what that could be for you as we get going back with our presentation again. And just give me one moment. And we're back. Thank you for your patience, friends. Okay, so I'd like to reach out to you in the, oh, geez, we're having somebody else who's having trouble connecting. Okay, all right, we'll see what we can do. Just follow along. I'll explain it as we go. And if you've got a separate sheet of paper or you have a Word document open or something like that, I will be able to explain to you what it is that we're doing and you'll be able to follow along fairly well. Okay, so what I'd like for us to do as a group, if you can, punch into the chat and let us know how many of these 6 apply to you. Any number from 0 through 6. Just start punching them in. Let's see. And how many people does this resonate with?
Look at it go.
Absolutely. I am very pleased to see a few zeros, and I would very much encourage you all to find jobs at those organizations. So what I want you to see here, friends, is that you're not alone in this, right? And so even as people who have completed pragmatic training, who are very focused on all of the ideals of what we want to do as product professionals, that we still face a broader organization where the loudest voice in the room wins, where we do these things because we've always done these things. My job is to follow orders, right? That's all very real. That's real world stuff. And so know that you're not alone. Just have a look at the chat for how many other people are facing exactly these issues, right? And so why do our buyers buy from us? Well, feel free to answer this in the chat as I go through. What we hear, if you go to a sales lead, you say, hey, why are people buying from us? Depending on the organization, that sales lead might kindly say, well, we have the best sales team in the industry. They've been doing it for a long time. They know exactly what they're doing. Our stuff, it's just a project management situation. They know it so well that everybody is buying from us because of how our sales is working. And then you might ask the marketing team, well, why is it that buyers are buying from us? And depending which organization you work in, they might say, well, hey, this marketing organization is the best marketing organization in the world. That's why people are buying from us. You ask our friends in development, depending on your organization, they might say, wow, we're making the best product that's out there. It's got this bell, it's got this whistle, it does this. And then same goes for our friends of support. Well, we're just there for our customers. We care. That's why people are buying from us. Ask the leadership, depending on your organization, you have the most rock star, best leadership in the entire industry, and that's why people are buying from us. But as we learned in Foundations, your opinion, although interesting, is irrelevant. And that applies to us in product as well. That doesn't just go for everybody else listed on the previous slide. And there are plenty of product organizations that believe that the reason people buy from them is because they are the best product organization. But ultimately, the truth is that your opinion, although interesting, is irrelevant. And thank you to Foundations for that. Our next truth is that the only thing that matters is what your market thinks. Because our third truth is that your buyers know more than your leaders, sales, and your development team do about why your product is bought. So what I want you to do is I want you to forget what you think you know about your market. There are no facts, answers, or truth in your office or in your head. And in your organization, when somebody has an idea, I want you to challenge each other to prove it, because the truth of business changes. And how do you know someone wants your solution if you've never asked? And so our NIHITO interviews are going to be our primary discovery. So you're going to say, well, we've tried this before. It took so long for us to try and get people. And then we do the interviews and it takes us forever to get our notes together. And when we get our notes together, we go ahead and we do it. And we're talking like 5 hours of work in order to get just one interview in, right? So you don't have time to do it. But the truth is, neither does anyone else, right? No one has the time to do it. And so now, the best way to learn from your customers is to reach out and listen to them habitually with frequency and in an open format. And so I would like to show you how to do that. And we're going to be doing that in just about 1 minute. But first, I want to present to you the ideal organization. And this is from, and I'm willing to say this in front of this group of people, this is from the smartest man I've ever met. And I've met a number of smart individuals. And Sunday truly is the most intelligent individual that I've ever met in my life. And I want you to imagine an organization where each thing that you learn instantly becomes a part of your business model so that any problems or shortcomings never happen again. The beginning of that, and the initiation of all of that concept is having a conversation. So please pull out your worksheet, and on your worksheet, at the top of the worksheet, I would like for you to set a clear, concise, deliberate, and specific research objective. Okay, and for those of you without the document, feel free to write research objective at the top. So what kind of things do we want to think about with our research objective? Oftentimes when people do this kind of work, they want to boil the ocean, right? They want to know, what problem can we solve? And that's the question that they ask. So they put as the research objective, what problem can I solve? Or why do we win or lose if you're doing more win-loss oriented work? Why do we win or lose? And what you do when you're trying to do that is you're boiling the ocean. You've got something that's so big that you can't possibly properly answer that question. Alternatively, we might ask something that's very much on the small side. So why is it that customer X is buying this very specific niche thing about this very particular feature that we've got buried at the bottom, right? And then you get too small. So what I want you to do is I want you to find that Goldilocks zone for a research objective. And this really is going to be, we want to learn about this for this, okay? We want to learn about X for Y reasons. So go ahead and write that at the top of your sheet. And Prachi, that comment that you just put into the chat, hold on to that for the question period at the end there, because I would very much like the
I made a note of it so we can bring that back when we need to.
I'd very much like the opportunity to address that.
Yeah.
So hopefully everybody has had the opportunity to put down a research objective. It doesn't really matter what you pick at this point in time, right? We're doing this as an exercise, and you can refer to this later and you can look at other ideas. Just get a research objective down for yourself. That's going to be the absolute top level of what it is that you're learning. And so then we're going to move the next level down. And the next level down from our research objective are topics that are going to help us reach our research objective. We need to define our lines of questioning. Okay, go ahead and write that as a headline if you're missing the template. We're going to reach our research objective by asking about these specific topics. And so if we're looking for something that is a little more problem oriented, then we can ask about initiatives and drivers of solution seeking. If we want to know what the buying process is like for them, we can have questions that are specifically tailored to that. Are our communications effective? How do we stand up against the competition, or don't we? Where are we coming up short? What features do they have that we don't have? How are we perceived before we started speaking with you? What did you think of us? How did you learn about us in the first place? And then any sort of kind of miscellaneous things that you want to add. And so for the purposes of the template, we're going to write a few. When we get to actually performing interviews, I just want you to keep in mind that you've got about a maximum of 30 minutes to talk to somebody, right? You've got about 30 minutes or so to have a conversation with them. And what that means is that you're maxed out at about 5 lines of questioning, because you've got time for about 3 to 4 questions per line of questioning. And so it's simple enough to just write down a laundry list that's 3 pages in a Word document that you're going to be asking these individuals. But what we want to do is narrow it down to something that we're going to be able to complete in a reasonable time. So hopefully, while we've been having this conversation, you've had the opportunity to just pick 1 or 2 lines of questioning that you would like to use for the purposes of today's exercise. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. Don't be worried about making something that's going to be top-notch on day 1 here. Let's just have an exercise here for what we're doing. So now that we've got our lines of questioning, now we're going to get down to some very specific questions. And for the purpose, again, of today's exercise, what I would like for you to do is to pick one of the topic areas that you chose in the previous section, and I would like for you to write down 2 interview questions that ladder up into that topic. And so here are some examples on the screen that you can consider. Hey, Eddie.
Yeah.
Did you have a construction project that you were doing earlier this year?
I did. We're calling it our Coronavation project, but it's keeping me busy here in the living room.
Right. So friends, what I want you to hear there is I just asked Eddie a question that could be answered with yes or no. And Eddie answered, I did, in the affirmative, for a yes. And then Eddie was kind enough to add some extra information because we're having a conversation, but nevertheless, he was simply able to answer that yes. That's not what we want to do in our interviews, unless we just need some specific demographic question. How old, how long you've been in this, or whatever you ask. But what we want to ask is open-ended questions that must be answered with long-form answers that provide as much information as you can get, because remember, these are our raw materials for performing our analysis. This is we're building up that big pile of bricks. And so if we ask some questions that could be answered yes or no, we don't get enough bricks by the end of the day. So make sure that the questions that you're using are open-ended questions that'll last. And the one that I want to most draw your attention to is the one at the end, which is why, until they cry. And I love this the first time that I heard it, and I've been using it ever since. And that's because, hey, Eddie.
Yes, I'll try to answer only what I'm asked this time. How about that?
Thank you. Did you engage in a construction project during COVID earlier in the year?
Yes.
Why?
I was hoping to add a little more space to our living room.
Why?
Well, there was this weird wall that was kind of in the way, and I thought I could kind of knock it back a little bit.
Why?
It always bugged me that there was this 4-foot wide half wall between the living room and the family room that seemed to do nothing but take up space. And so
I
I
agree
reduced
with
it.
Rosanna that it very much sounds like a toddler asking why. But what I'd like to point out is by the third why, I understood Eddie's original problem, didn't I? Eddie's original problem is that wall had always irritated him, and he wanted to relieve that itch of the irritating wall. And I went from a question that was yes or no, which we don't want to ask, with 3 whys to understanding what Eddie's actual problem was. And so, it can seem kind of funny that that's the way that we're going to do it. But truthfully, it's the most important question in NIHITO interviews is the why. And sometimes we get really cooperative participants, right? And sometimes they're a little bit on the less cooperative side. And so when they're feeling a bit less cooperative, that why really is your friend, because it could even just get you one extra sentence that tells you that extra building block that you're going to need for your analysis, okay? And so that's your interview question. So we can't speak with everyone, so let's define our interview targets. So it doesn't help us if we're trying to find out why Eddie wanted to get into a construction project if we start asking Sarah what kind of car she drives, right? And so we need to narrow down who it is that we're going to be speaking to. One of the ways that we can do that is we can pull a list of recent evaluators from Salesforce or from somebody on the sales team, however it is that you're keeping track of your customers in your CRM. And we want to pull out some recent evaluators in the market, some people who within the last 60 days have engaged your organization. And I'll tell you why, because if you can remember the kind of like the potentials, the evaluators in the market, and the people who aren't yet in the market from the foundations course, those evaluators have recently looked at your competition. They've looked at every available solution within the marketplace right now. They're intimately familiar with everything that's going on. And if you're only going to speak to one person, or if you're only going to speak to a few people, those recent evaluators are going to have the most information to be able to help you out. Now, maybe your research project isn't benefited by speaking with recent evaluators, but generally speaking, the recent evaluators have just finished looking at what the market has to offer and can tell you as much as you would like to know about most things. So consider those recent evaluators for what it is that you're doing. Okay, so we have now, we're just about 30 minutes into this call, and it's called How to NIHITO Interview Like a Pro. And please notice that we have not yet started talking interviewing. And that's because what makes a program, a NIHITO program, truly succeed is the planning that you put into it. And as we go into doing an interview, we've laid it out on this template that you've got. If you lay it out, your questions with, here's this topic, here are these questions. Here's this topic, here are these questions. Here's this topic, here are these questions. And if you ask the questions in the same order every single time, then when you take your notes or you've got the information back after the call, you'll find that it's already pre-sorted by category for you, so that you can do your analysis conveniently. Now you can take 5 disparate people that you've spoken with, and their answers are already pre-categorized for your analysis. And so what people used to do with NIHITO interviews is they want to go into a pure blank white sheet, right, as the most optimal way in order to gain information. And then you just have a straight conversation with somebody. And that's great. That's a good way to learn. And if you want to go for that very pure way of doing it, or you're just doing a couple interviews, or you're validating an idea that you have on that kind of like dream product that you want to create, then that can be an okay way of approaching these types of interviews. But I can't reinforce enough how, for the busy product professional, if you want to succeed and regularly, habitually doing NIHITO interviews, how having a structure will take 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% of the challenges of performing this type of work out of what it is that you're doing, okay? Because everything comes pre-sorted. You don't have to think about what the next question is going to be. It is on the page. You don't have to think about what you're going to be asking about because it's already there. And if you come across something that's interesting that wasn't originally in your line of questioning, you can always add that. You can always throw in a why and find out something new, but that structure is going to get you there. Now, just before we move on from targets very quickly, I'd like to share with you a few ways that you can get people to interview. So this is really kind of going to depend, but if you can think back to, NASA has a slogan that came out of Apollo 13, and that slogan is that failure is not an option, right? And so when we say, well, how do I find these people? I don't know. Okay, we don't want to do that. We can go into Salesforce and pull the people that we've just found. We can look for our personal networks. We can go through our professional networks. We can call whoever it is that we can call that's going to get us to the next person, that's going to get us to the person that we want to do. And so that kind of tenaciousness in being able to track somebody down, I can't say enough about that, because you're going to go out to maybe a 1 in 10 are going to respond to you, 1 in 8. depending if you're in a kind of once you get really consumer and kind of transactional, you could end up asking 100 people before you get somebody who's willing to participate if you're not incentivizing your program with gift cards or something of the like. But those recent evaluators, they've been engaged with your sales team. And so you can ask your sales team to provide what's called a warm handshake or an introductory email that says, my friend over here in product is looking to learn more about your experience in working with us. Would you mind just having a quick conversation with them? We'd really appreciate that as part of a continuous learning process. And then with that email, you can respond to that person and arrange for the interview to happen. And that's going to be your best chance for getting interviews, is the last person that had an engagement with them within your organization. Have them do an introduction for you, and then you can pick up the call. And you're going to be able to do this all very quickly by working it that way. So yes, we are now 35 minutes into this, and we haven't actually done an interview yet. So I'm going to interview Eddie about his construction project. So what I would like you to do is I would like for you to pull out a piece of paper or a Word document or however it is that you would like to take notes. And I would like for you to take notes on what it is that Eddie and I are talking about. Pull out the main points in each of the lines of question that I ask, and you'll hear the lines of questionings as being differentiated. And I would also like for you to try and write down a pull quote for yourself, because the power of the NIHITO interview is the next time you go into a pitch meeting where you need to convince people that you've done your research, you throw up a quote that perfectly encapsulates the idea that you've brought to leadership, and you're going to be the winner that day. And so find that quote in what it is that Eddie and I are talking about that really nails down what his problem or how a solution could be found. Okay, as part of the exercise. So Eddie, what problem were you trying to solve when you decided to reach for a solution?
The main problem was adding square footage to the living room.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, when we moved in, there was this weird 4-foot wide half wall between the living room and the family room that seemed to not do anything but take up space, and it bothered me. So I mean, I considered hiring somebody, but eventually, with my wife's approval and go ahead, I got out a sledgehammer and YouTube and went to town on it.
How is having that in the way of your living room? How is that impacting your experience living in your home?
Frankly, the living room, the place where you'd have guests come and sit, was very small. We couldn't fit a full couch against that wall, only a love seat. So it was a little too cozy for visitors.
Right. So friends, that was our problem-oriented section. That was our solution drivers, why it was that Eddie was looking for a solution in the first place. And now we'll move on to the next one. Eddie, how'd you find potential solutions to your problem?
I looked around at prices to have a contractor come in and take care of it for me, and I considered those. And then I also looked up, some kind of do-it-yourself sites to see if it was something I was able to tackle. I asked around to a bunch of friends to see if they'd ever done anything like that to get their advice. That helped a little bit. Those are some of the sources I looked.
How did those solutions stack up against each other?
The friends weren't much help. Not many of them had done anything like that. The contractor, I'm sure they would have done a fantastic job. Um, it would have been much more expensive than doing it myself. And I ended up going that route, doing it myself, uh, for two reasons: the cost, and then I thought it'd be an opportunity to educate myself on some types of renovation projects I hadn't done yet, and it worked out.
Eddie, did you consult other contractors or just the one?
I had checked with a couple before I did it. Their prices were similar to each other.
Yeah, can you just explain to us how those contractors stacked up against each other?
They were very similar in their abilities, what they could do. Their prices as well were similar, well into the thousands of dollars, but again, very similar. One was a little bit closer geographically, so that may have been a little more convenient had I gone with that option than the other one was. Actually, and that one that was closer also, my parents used them for some renovations as well, so they were actually a referral.
Right. Okay, friends, so now we understand how Eddie tried to source particular contract solutions. He found solutions for his problem by reaching out to his network, by searching out for contractors. So let's have a little bit of chat about understanding what that buying process was like. Eddie,
Mm-hmm.
how important was that referral from your parents in making your purchase decision?
Extremely important. They were very happy with the job that they had done for them. And, if I decided to go with the contractor route between those two, the referral would have tipped these guys over the top. That would have done it.
Right. So now we've got a better understanding of that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Eddie about what it was like actually working with it. So in technology, this is what was the implementation like, or what's the support like, something along the lines of that. Eddie, can you just walk me through kind of high level how the project went for you working with the contractor?
Uh, and I ended up, so I didn't use the contractor. I ended up doing it mostly myself and going to the home improvement stores.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I
So
misunderstood that.
yeah. Back and forth. It was a lot of trips back and forth to the home improvement stores over the course of many weeks. Probably if I had gone with the contractor, it would have happened quicker, maybe in a weekend or two.
And
But
so
it took
just so
many
I'm clear,
weekends.
what was the deciding factor in the do-it-yourself versus the contractor?
Mostly the price. Mostly the price.
Okay. And what was your experience like when you completed the project?
It was a pretty proud moment. The whole family came parading down and, and looked on it approvingly and lovingly. And yes, it was a proud daddy moment.
Right. And so, friends, now the last thing that we're going to do, we're going to check in with Eddie to see if he would recommend that process or that solution to a friend and whether he would be willing to do it again. Eddie, do you think that the solution worked in such a way that you would want to recommend that to somebody?
Not everybody, but if a person was confident enough that they could learn how to do some renovation by watching YouTube videos, and if they had the time, which was a major factor, then yes, I would recommend the way that it goes.
Eddie, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your insights. It's going to go a long way to improving our XYZ.
Thank
Eddie,
you.
bravo, sir.
Uh,
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. That was great. That was really, really great.
those high
Um,
school drama classes came in handy, right?
so great. So that is kind of the real feel of what an interview is like and how it can work when you're working in the same order every time. You're asking the same questions every time, and you can understand by how speaking with different people in the market how that's going to work differently. Now, I think what you all found was that taking notes about the important things that Eddie was saying was really challenging. And that especially pulling direct quotes from what Eddie was saying was really challenging because it just moves on. And so I think you found that interviewing and taking notes are not necessarily compatible with each other. And that indeed the process of taking notes, if you are the interviewer, is going to get in the way of the free flow of conversation, not to mention the amount of time of your available interview time it eats up. And so what we want to do is we want to record our call. And so if the person is remote, you can use any one of the conferencing softwares that allow you to record the interview, download the interview later. And then if you want to, you can take the time to transcribe it yourself or just now re-listen to it and now take notes and do it. But what you'll find is that that's going to be eating up quite a bit of your time when there are literally dozens of international transcription services that will do your work for 75 cents a recorded minute or less, and will provide you with a complete transcript of the entire interview, now searchable, indexable, and ready to go for analysis. And so if we go through our project and we have 10 calls, now we've got 10 calls in put together. We summarize those calls, we pull quotes from each one that are relevant to our topics. And that information is now put together in such a way that we've done it in a repeatable way. We've done it in a way that it didn't eat up all of our time, that we can keep on doing it. And we now have a searchable record of what it was that people said. Okay. And so now that we've pulled all of that together into a package, we want to tell anyone who will listen about what we've learned. Okay. We need to share this out with the organization, because remember, the goal of every NIHITO program, every NIHITO interview, is to affect change within the organization, just like Sandeep said in his quote earlier in the presentation. Okay. And so you need to tell everybody who will listen what you have learned. We also, because we planned a little bit, we got buy-in from everybody who needed to listen to it in the first place before we even started talking to people. And they're waiting to hear what we have to say. And now that we've done 5 to 7 to 10 calls, we can actually do that. Now, just before we move into the very kind of final section of this, what I want you to know is that between 5 and 7 calls will usually be right. It will directionally tell you what is going on. Okay. And so you don't need to worry about getting yourself up to 15 if you're doing a one-off project with a very specific research objective. Completing 5 to 7 calls will generally give you enough information to be able to go validate that using a survey or other method. Of course, win-loss is one of the boxes in the pragmatic framework. And if you're doing win-loss, you want to be doing that absolutely on the regular, talking to everybody that you can. And now that you've got this method of how to do it in a repeatable way that's very simple, then you can go ahead and get about doing that on the regular for yourself. So that is how to NIHITO interview like a pro. Let's get to some questions.
Yeah, we had a couple flow in the chat. Just another call out to our audience. If you have more questions, you can stick those in the chat. Make sure you're sending them either to all attendees, or you can send them to just myself, Eddie Gordon, or you can send them over to Charles. Either way, stick them there in the chat, and we will. Hey, there we go. We got them coming in already. So here goes, Charles. I'm going to. Oh, we get to see your beautiful face. There
hey everybody,
smiling. Here is a question that popped up early on from David, who sounds like he's got a unique situation. He says, our customers are local government managers who are often directed to buy based on the lowest cost, and they may be held tightly to that standard. How can we use win-loss with customers who may not be able to buy on any basis other than price? And then he adds, and they're not rewarded for giving honest answers if asked about their purchase rationale.
Well, the thing is, if you know you're always losing on price, you need to sharpen your pencil, right? Like, not to put on my business consultant hat instead of my interviewer hat, yeah. But that's really what it is. But the truth is that that's not really what's happening. They're not really just buying on price. They're buying to spec and on price, right? And so you might be concerned that your competition is cutting corners, right? They're not doing as much stuff. That's how they're able to get to that price. Government individuals, sometimes they're not permitted to speak about what's going on, but other times they are. And so the only thing you can do is really ask about it. And I highly recommend trying to get a hold of those individuals and have that kind of broader structured conversation about what drove them to do it, how they found potential vendors, what marketing materials they consulted, did they work with a third-party consultant, what, now that they're actually getting into implementation with not you, are they getting what they expected? Is it working properly? Find out what it is that you can. And if you need to sweet talk these people, you go ahead and you sweet talk these people. If you need to incentivize them in order to have a conversation with you, you do that, right? And if you're meeting them in person, put your phone down, put your camera on, press record on video, and let it sit for the duration. Have that transcribed later, or get an app that does specific for recording, whatever. But have that conversation, because oftentimes when they're just competing on price, they aren't. Or you might find that edge within the competitive set.
Any specific recommendation for working with government employees? Is there any different there than in the private sector?
So I'm going to say there is a bit, in the sense that they tend to be in a fairly bureaucratic organization, right? And so finding the person that you need to speak to can be a little bit more on the challenging side. We take advantage at the win-loss agency and market-driven business. We take advantage of every interview. So we get a customer list, we reach out, or they reach out, help us, give us the warm handshake that we talked about, that kind of jazz. And then we get a person who's just to the left of the ideal individual that we would have liked to have spoken to. And that'll happen to you too. But that person still has something to say. right? And so in the government organization, you're just plain more likely to get somebody who's a little bit left of center because they're so bureaucratic and big that getting to that one person who was the influencer or that one person who was the decision driver and buyer can be a little bit on the challenging side.
Beautiful. Are you ready to tackle Prachi's question from earlier? I made a note of it here.
Maybe what it was, please?
That was, if you reach out to your customer, they spend time complaining and asking for faster horses. We cannot deliver all that because our backlog is already committed.
I'll respectfully disagree with that and say that the faster horse argument is it's dated, right? It's not real. Because when we ask them what is going on in the way that we just did in the interview that we talked about, we're going to get information that isn't about them telling us that they want a faster horse. And truthfully, it's our job in product to be able to convert the raw information of here's what the market needs are into an elegant and interesting product, right? And so you can't look to them to give you the solution. They look to you, you just need the problem from them. Right? And that's what we're looking for in the interviews. We're looking better to understand them, what their experience was like trying to find a solution from the drivers, how they found people, how they stacked them up against each other, and now that they're doing something, what that experience is like.
Yeah, there you go.
If they're just complaining, you're not owning the interview. Like when Eddie was doing the interview, if he kept on talking about something that was useless, I would have gently interrupted the man and re-steered the conversation the right way. And if he's being obstinate and not answering, I mean, I still do calls. I did one the other day, and this guy did not want to be on the call. The only reason he was doing it was because he was incentivized with a $100 Amazon gift card, and he gave me one sentence terse answers for everything that I asked. That just worked the guy. You know, I could have sat there and said, "Why are you even on the call, man? What? Like, you're not giving me anything. Why are we doing this?" And instead of being that way, I just worked that guy. Why? Why do you think that is? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Can you just explain that a little bit more for me? And so on. And that ended up being one of the best interviews out of that project because he really said no to that company. He did not want to work with them. And the only reason he was talking to me was because I was paying him to do that at the rate of $200 an hour. And so, you know, if they're just complaining and not telling you the information that you need to know, then you as an interviewer need to step up and do more.
It looks like Amanda in the chat just recommended cupcakes as an incentive. Also, Amanda. There you go. Amanda. There you go.
Excellent.
There are some good ones flowing in here. Related to what we were just talking about, Tonia asks, hope I pronounced that right. Sorry, Tonia asks, have you ever had interviewers who were resistant to being recorded? What can you do about that?
So yeah, and that happens infrequently. Generally speaking, if people are willing to participate, they're willing to record. If somebody says, I don't want to be recorded, then you can, as a first intercept, say, okay, this is private research. This isn't going anywhere. This is only within our organization to help us get better. It's not going to be made public. Your name won't be associated with what it is that you're saying. And oftentimes you can chip away at some of the people who are feeling reluctant. The fact of the matter is you're eventually going to come across somebody who is willing to talk to you, but not willing to let you record it. And so in that instance, you just plain have to bite the bullet, pull out your notebook, and do your best in scrambling while still conducting the interview.
Charles, here's a timely one from Eric that just came through. It says, considering the current COVID-19 environment, can you provide any best practices for conducting NIHITO calls virtually or just by phone instead of person? How do we do that these
Okay, so if we walk through the entire process, the vast majority of the preparatory work doesn't involve being in an office. The solicitation of the interviews doesn't need to be in an office. You need to get a list of the people that you're going to be speaking to. You can send out individualized emails if your read list is small enough, or you can send out larger emails. Picking up the phone is free, friends. It's right here. All of us have national long distance calling, and if you don't, set up a Google number and start making free international long distance calling, however it is that you need to do it. Ultimately, the process of conducting the interviews is exactly the same, working remotely as doing it in person. In fact, the only thing that I would do in person is that I would have my questions on a sheet of paper in front of me, and I would be recording directly onto my mobile device.
Nice.
Yeah.
Here's pulling back to sort of the implementation of a NIHITO program. Joy asks, how would you roll out a NIHITO program to a team of 15 to 20 product managers, all of different levels and experience, and how do you manage that program once you get it going?
Well, number one, I'm really glad you asked. And number two, the answer to that is that Pragmatic offers a market discovery lab that is a one-day workshop that spins up all 15 people.
Very nice and concise.
Yeah.
Here is a question from Elizabeth who asks, oh, this is back to our worksheet that we were using
Yeah.
earlier. How do
Yeah.
you distinguish between the lines of questioning versus the detailed question? What's the difference between those two categories?
So topics versus specifics, right? So we were generally speaking about decision drivers or about ways in which they found vendors. And so you can write 15 different questions that narrowly get down to how they found vendors, right? Did you use a consultant? Did you use search? Did you use your personal network? Once we get to that, how influential was your network? What resources did you consult? Looking at Gartner and the like. Once you get into your product specifics, what features really matter to you, or even in the competition. What does the competition have that we don't? How did the competition get your attention? In a when you had them in for demos, what did the other guys do really well that we didn't do very well? Or what did we do really well to differentiate ourselves from them, right? And so the line of questioning is the topic, but those individual questions, there can be very many of them that ladder up into that specific kind of subset.
Charles, we've got so many good questions coming in, and we are almost to our hour mark. I'm going to let's see, you're going to give them, it looks like you had your email address up earlier. Was that the?
Yep.
Is it all right if folks reach out to you there if they have questions we didn't get to?
I would very much like for people to reach out to contact@marketdriven.business and we can talk there. Yeah.
There, beautiful. That was the charles@marketdriven.business email. Beautiful. I'm going to ask you one last question here that we kind of like to wrap up with sometimes. It is this one. If you were to have our audience today do two things differently, you can only pick two, based on what we've talked about today, what would those two things be, Charles?
I want you to perform an interview this week. I want you to do it right now. And whether you're afraid, you don't know how to do it, you're concerned you're going to butter it, find a safe customer. And there are safe customers out there who like working with your company, who have a friend within the organization. Reach out to that individual and conduct an interview and get over the I don't know how to do it, the I'm afraid, the I'm going to screw up my questions, the I'm going to talk too much myself, these types of things, right? Secondly, actually record and analyze that interview. Have it transcribed. Don't just try and do it yourself. Send it to a transcription and look at what that is, because you will be so refreshed to see how much information about your work these people are willing to share with you if you just ask about it.
Beautiful. It's a gold mine of information.
Veritable gold mine. I'll put your last slide back up there for you, Eddie.
Charles, this has been so fantastic. Thank you so much for your experience and for your advice. We'd be silly not to implement it all. So listen and heed well, our audience. I'm just going to mention our next product chat is going to be Tuesday, June 30th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And we will welcome Dr. Kenya Odur, Managing Director of Lean Geeks. She'll be discussing the creation of user narratives and opportunity statements. So tune in for that one. And of course, if you have more questions that our Pragmatic Institute instructors can help you with, you can always join us every Friday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time for office hours with a Pragmatic Instructor. Find more information about that on our social media pages. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us today. Have a fantastic rest of your week and stay safe and healthy. We'll see you next time.